Hello, and I want to apologize for not having a video up for quite some time. I've had some technical issues, some other kinds of issues, and I've been trying a few different things that didn't work out, so I'm not sure what I did this time will work out, but you can let me know in the comments below. It's an interesting subject, and I'll probably do more videos on this subject. It's about chronic pain and how to deal with it. So without any further ado, let's take a look. Okay, here we're going to talk about how to deal with chronic pain by using your brain, which is kind of fascinating. So let's go ahead and talk about that. What we want to do is talk about what really pain is. Now, pain is a nociception, which is sort of your body, the term that your body, your sensory system is called, that reacts to pain and other feeling is called nociception. And it's the sensory nervous system's response to certain harmful or potentially harmful stimuli. So paper cut, the nociception system is stimulated and it travels through a group of nerves that can potentially rise to the level of being noticed by your brain. So the interesting thing about the brain is that it cannot be objectively measured because the brain is, or the pain is a subjective experience. Everyone has a different response to pain. And, one person's pain is another person's pleasure. That sounds kind of crazy, but in reality, pain is hard to measure. And it's not, so pain, like a feeling, like a pinprick in your hand or anything, is not pain until it actually reaches to the level of your brain and your brain notices that it's pain. Now, the thing about pain is it's inconvenient, but it is a necessary element for our survival. We need pain in order for us to survive properly. Now, pain is divided into three main categories. There's acute pain, subacute pain, and chronic pain. And this video is about how to deal with chronic pain, and which we'll talk about in a minute. But I want you to understand the three categories of pain. And so acute pain typically lasts up to 3 months. And it's directly related to an injury, such as a sprained ankle or a paper cut, like I mentioned before. Short duration, 3 months or less, and it should gradually resolve as the damaged tissue, whether it's a paper cut, broken ankle, back pain, whatever, starts to get better. It should resolve. Now, subacute pain is basically longer-lasting acute pain, essentially. So if you had acute pain for a few weeks and then subacute occurs up to the 3-month period. Now, chronic pain is a completely different animal altogether. Chronic pain is pain that lasts more than 3 months. And it's typically has a sort of a roller coaster kind of issue where it gets worse sometimes, it comes and goes, it's not there anymore, and it usually is related not to anything specific, like, oh, I hurt my back, or I picked up a pencil in my back. It's typically things that wouldn't generally cause a lot of injury to tissue, and the chronic pain outlasts the normal healing process. That's important to know. Now, it's important for us to understand a term that is in the literature called Central Sensitivity Syndrome, or CSS for short. Now, the central nervous system increases sensation across the body, so a light touch can actually be very painful to the brain, which can increase the brain's response to stimulation in the future. So, in other words, it makes the brain more sensitive to things. You feel your socks all the time, or like with diabetic neuropathy, you feel like there's marbles on the bottom of your feet. All that is central sensitivity. And it's a syndrome that we need to understand in order to help with chronic pain, because to understand chronic pain, it is important to understand that chronic pain is actually a syndrome like central sensitivity syndrome. It is sensitive to feeling. That's what chronic pain is. The research is pointing in this direction. Now, in that case then, chronic pain actually requires a different type of treatment plan than acute pain. Acute pain, you treat the damaged tissue, you treat the ankle, you treat the wrist or whatever, or the back, and over a period of 3 months, well, it should get better because the tissue or the damage that occurred has healed, so the pain should improve. When it doesn't, something has gone wrong, and that needs to be treated differently, because treating the back for chronic pain may not work. So, a sampling of syndromes or symptoms associated with central sensitivity, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of these, is fibromyalgia, chronic headaches or migraines, complex regional pain syndrome, depression, which is a type of pain, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, brain fog, or other medically unexplained symptoms, which they actually call medically functional problems or functional symptoms. They can't explain, they can't give you a drug, they can't do surgery to fix it, they don't understand it. So it's functional problems. And that's typically what chronic pain is a functional problem. Now, to understand how we can deal with chronic pain, we have to understand 3 main brain networks. One is called the default mode network, or DMN. The other is the central executive network, or CEN, or the salient network. Excuse me. Now, these networks are balanced within each other, and they inhibit each other. The salient network actually helps to balance these things out. And we'll talk about how that works in a few moments. But let's talk about the activities that will stimulate these networks. So the activities that stimulate the DMN or default mode network are relaxation massage, mindfulness meditation, body scans, listening to your heartbeat, yoga, and talk therapy all stimulate the default mode network. You might know where I'm going with this, but it's pretty interesting. So it is called a default mode network because it turns on when the brain's at rest. When the brain's at rest, that's what turns on, is the default mode network. Now, the central executive network, or CEN, it actually, when it's activated, and there are things that activate it, which we'll talk about in a minute, it inhibits the default mode network. It doesn't let your brain rest, in a sense. Because what it does is it engages your brain to think, which is a good thing. But when you have these syndromes involved, it may not be a good thing. It maintains your attention on a task, which actually could be pain, or depression, or headaches, or irritable bowel syndrome. It pays attention to it. That's what the important thing is, that it pays attention to the thing that is most prevalently occurring in your body at the time. It also can pay attention to outside things as well, but when you've had pain for a while, the central executive network can say, all right, we have to pay attention to this, with the help of the salience network, which we'll talk about in a minute. So it's helpful to think of it as active when you are putting effort in towards something like, a goal-directed task, paying attention to the pain. So the balance between the central executive network and the default mode network are coordinated by the salience network. So the salient network actually is what's important in giving the brain input to say, okay, this is what I need to do, or this is what I need to do. We'll talk about that in a minute. So the salience network, it directs outside stimuli to the central executive network. So in a sense, the salient network looks at something and says, oh, this is important. let's get the central executive network to work on it. So it's sort of like a balancing act, right? Where the salient network is the pivot, and the default mode network is on one side, and the central network is on the other, and it kind of influences which networks are active. So the theory is, and this is a theory about chronic pain, is that the central executive network becomes focused on the pain after about 3 months with the help of the salience network. In other words, it makes the pain important, right? How many individuals, or even yourself, know that the pain has taken over your life? It has made everything, you judge your life up related to the pain. So it stimulates, by stimulating the central executive network, it inhibits the default mode network. So there's no sort of break, nothing to stop the central executive network. So there are two things that will potentially affect the default mode network and keep the central executive network going, is the central executive network and the salient network. So you're sort of at a disadvantage in a way. Your brain is kind of at a disadvantage of, you know, oh, I have to listen to this pain. I have to look at this pain. So in effect, your brain, with the help of the CN, keeps the pain alive, even though there's no tissue damage there, because it's already healed. So you see, just going and treating the back or the ankle or something, or the knee because it's still in pain, there's no tissue damage there, so the treatment is not really going to do much. That's why chronic pain is such a hard thing to take care of. So when the default mode network is inhibited by the central executive network, your brain never gets to rest. Your brain becomes constantly focused on pain or stiffness or other body issues, and that's where brain fog comes in, because your brain gets tired. It can't think of other things. Okay? So you see how all this kind of comes together. Now, the other thing that's interesting is our brain up here, and this is very important to understand, our brain sends information to the rest of our body, right? It sends it down. And it sends it down through the brain stem. Now, the brain stem is what controls all our autonomic functions. In other words, digestion, heart rate, blood pressure, sweating, all that stuff is controlled by our brain stem. So if this control from our brain is reduced, guess what? It's like the mice will play when the cats are away, because the brain stem gets to do what it wants to do. Because this brain is thinking about the pain all the time, and it's not controlling the brain stem, which makes your body kind of go a little crazy. So what can we do about it? Now, this is the interesting stuff, I think. Now, you want, really, what makes sense here is you want to stimulate the default mode network. Why? Because if you stimulate the default mode network, it'll inhibit the central executive network. But that's a challenge, right? There are 6 things that can actually stimulate the default mode network. One is massage, relaxation massage, not the kind of massage where it's really deep and digging in there, but it's like calming and relaxation. Mindfulness, which we'll talk about. Body scan, again, we'll talk about what that is. And listening to your heartbeat, as well as yoga. Yoga's great for it. And talk therapy. Yep, talk therapy. Not drugs, but talk therapy. Now, there are 3 things that you can do after watching this video right now to sort of have some kind of impact on your pain, hopefully. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, because your chronic pain's been there for at least over 3 months. So you have to sort of teach your brain how to calm itself and forget about the pain. You have to sort of teach the brain to forget about the pain. Now, this is something. Now, if you looked at my other videos, you've seen things called neuroplasticity. And I mentioned that there is good neuroplasticity and there's bad neuroplasticity. Pain is bad neuroplasticity, and it gets your brain used to it. It likes it. I know it sounds crazy, but your brain likes it. So there are 3 things you can do to sort of help your brain or help the default mode network get excited so it can suppress the central executive network. Again, I mentioned mindfulness. And this is what I mean about mindfulness. Now, meditation is awesome, right? But guided meditation is not what we can try and do. And there's a little controversy about this because I'm asking for you to just think about your breath and nothing else. No music, no one telling you to think about your breath, no one telling you to think about other things. You're just sitting there thinking about your breath. You're breathing in and out, and you're just thinking about your breath. You're not counting your breath. You're not saying breathe in deep, breathe out. You're not doing any of that. All you do is breathing, because the default mode network likes that type of activity. It likes activity that's internal and not directed. When you count your breath, I want to do 10 breaths, that's the central executive network getting excited. You just want to let it go. And I like to say put on a timer that you can't hear, that will go off. And I usually recommend starting with 30 seconds because I'm going to be honest with you, it's hard. It's hard to do this because you don't want any intrusive thoughts because that will excite the central executive network. I know. So you start with 30 seconds and see if you can do it. Once you get some impact, like if you're in it for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, you're breathing, all of a sudden you're starting thinking about, oh, the job I have to do or my kid or whatever, you're going to have to stop. And you're going to have to start it again at some other point in the day. Just let it go. The one thing is don't judge yourself because you're teaching your brain a new skill. It's almost like exercising your brain as opposed to your muscles. You know how you can't pick up a 1,000-pound weight right away. It takes time to get up to that point. The same thing with this exercise. It takes time to build your brain's ability to not think about other things while you're just focusing on breathing. Okay? Now, the other one, so I kind of recommend you start with one and try and master it, and then you can start the other 2. But you can pick which one of these 3 you like the best. There is an easier one of all of these, which we'll go in a moment. So the other one is a body scan. Now, a body scan is just thinking about a part of your body. It could be your ankles, knees, elbows, but you don't want to think about the one that's painful, like your back or whatever, or knee or head. You don't want to think about that, but you want to just think about it. Think about how it feels. Think about what it relates to. You're just thinking about your knee or whatever. And that, again, is for 30 seconds, and you build up from there. Now, a body scan is going through each part. At 30 seconds, it's hard to do a body scan, but if you could think about 1 or 2 parts in that 30 seconds, that is the beginning. Again, you build up from there, okay? Now, the next one, I think, is probably the easiest of them all, is just listening to your heartbeat. And I say, listen for 30 seconds, and you can get a pretty cheap stethoscope from Amazon for about $5.99. You just have to listen to it. You listen to it for 30 seconds. Just hear the beat. All you have to do is hear the beat. That, to me, is probably the easiest one of all the other 3 to do. At Amazon, I have a link below in the description for where you can get that. So if we look at the DMN, the default mode network, as a means to inhibit the central executive network, then simply doing those things above will excite the DMN and inhibit the CN and hopefully reduce pain. It's worked before for many people. Now, the idea, again, I want to emphasize, is not to allow other thoughts to creep into these exercises above. Once they do, stop and try again later. Just, no judgment of yourself. That's very important not to judge yourself because you're learning how to do something that not many of us can do. But you're in a situation where you have to try. Now, you can do this exercise periodically throughout a day or week, whatever, and you can improve yourself, just like I said, every other exercise, like lifting weights or running. You can run further and faster as you do it, but you're not going to run a 100-yard dash the first day and expect to do really well. So that's what's very important. You want to improve neuroplasticity in your brain, and it takes time. So this is really interesting stuff and kind of groundbreaking. The information or the realization of this has occurred as soon as 2011. So this theory is very interesting and can be very powerful, and of course it's controversial. I've listed all the resources I used in terms of studying, working on this video, and give it a try. It's not going to cost you anything, and give it a few weeks or a couple of months to see what happens if your pain is reduced. So without any further ado, good luck to you and have a blessed day.